What if everything Prince Harry believed about his family was a lie? It all began with a letter. A thick, cream-colored envelope with no return address, no royal seal, and no warning. Delivered by hand to Prince Harry's Montecito mansion, the envelope looked harmless. But what was inside would send shockwaves not just through his own household, but across Buckingham Palace, Hollywood, and into the deepest corners of the press. Inside that envelope was a truth he never asked for, never wanted, and perhaps was never meant to see. Before we continue, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At first, Harry thought it was just another media tip-off or anonymous threat, the kind that arrived more often now that his name was constantly in headlines. But as he peeled open the heavy paper and slid the contents out, he saw something that stopped his heart cold. There were photographs. Crisp, high-resolution images. A man's hand resting on Meghan's back. A familiar smile exchanged between two people who weren't supposed to be smiling at each other like that. Then, behind those images, a folded DNA report with two names, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, and George Clooney. And at the bottom, in perfect black ink, a signature, Amal Clooney. The words accompanying the documents were few, but devastating. You deserve to know the truth. I'm sorry it took me this long. From the outside, Amal Clooney was the picture of poise, an international human rights lawyer, mother of twins, wife to one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors. Her marriage to George Clooney had always seemed untouchable. A fairy tale. Just like Harry's whirlwind romance with Meghan had once seemed. Two powerful couples. Two glamorous unions. But behind the scenes, something had been unraveling, slowly, painfully, and secretly. And now, Amal had done the unthinkable. She had broken the silence. For years, whispers of an unusual closeness between George Clooney and Meghan Markle had circulated quietly among staffers, stylists, charity event planners, and a few select royal watchers. Their relationship had always seemed a little too comfortable, a little too casual. George had publicly defended Meghan more than once, praising her in interviews, calling out the press, even throwing parties in her honor before the royal wedding. Some said it was just celebrity solidarity. Others now wondered if it had always been something more. But a DNA test? That was no longer speculation. That was science. As Harry stared at the page, the implications began to spiral. The numbers didn't lie. The man he believed to be his son, Archie, the boy he had held, protected, and fought for in courtrooms and interviews, was now under a storm of doubt. His fatherhood, his marriage, his very identity as a protector and provider. It was all being ripped away with every second he stared at that paper. And Amal's motive? That's where things get more complicated. Sources close to the Clooneys have said that Amal had suspected George of infidelity for some time, but lacked hard evidence. He was careful, clever, slippery. But then, an unexpected pregnancy by Meghan, one the timeline of which had always sparked questions, gave her an idea. Amal ordered a private DNA test on her own, not to find out if her husband had cheated, but to find out if her husband had left behind a child. According to insiders, Amal had access to private investigators, elite labs, and, most critically, a piece of George's DNA already on file from a medical consultation. The rest was simply logistics. And now, here it was. A report that named George Clooney not just as Meghan's possible secret lover, but potentially the biological father of Prince Harry's firstborn son. What came next was chaos. Silent chaos. The kind that doesn't scream in the streets, but instead sits like poison at the dinner table, waiting for someone to finally take a sip. Harry didn't react right away. That's what shocked those closest to him. He didn't scream, didn't rip the paper, didn't confront Meghan. He simply sat, pale, motionless, and unreadable. According to one longtime staffer, he stared at the envelope for over 45 minutes without saying a word, just reading, rereading, as if trying to make the words disappear through sheer willpower. Eventually, he stood up and walked into his office. Alone, the door closed behind him, and no one saw him again until the following morning. That night, Meghan was nowhere to be found. Some say she had already sensed something was wrong and left to stay at a nearby luxury hotel under a pseudonym. Others believe she was warned that something was coming, perhaps not by Amal, but by someone in George's inner circle who had finally had enough of the secrets. But why now? Why would Amal wait years before dropping a bomb like this into Prince Harry's life? One theory suggests Amal had held back out of dignity, trying to preserve what was left of her own marriage. She didn't want to hurt Harry. She didn't want to destroy Meghan. But as more questions swirled in the press, and as George's alibi for key weekends during Meghan's pregnancies began to crumble, Amal decided to act, not out of vengeance, but out of principle. She reportedly told a confidant, "Harry has a right to know. If George is the father, I want no part in covering it up. The truth matters." That principle, the truth, is now threatening to tear two worlds apart. The royal family, already fractured by scandal, is facing what could be its most destabilizing crisis since the infamous Diana interview in 1995. But this time, it's not a confession to the BBC. It's a confidential envelope, sent across the Atlantic, carrying proof that may redefine the royal bloodline. And Harry? He's trapped between two truths, the boy he loves as his own, and the possibility that he has been betrayed in the deepest, most unforgivable way. Imagine the torment, the doubt, every moment replaying in his head, the first ultrasound, the royal birth announcement, the family portraits, the day they fled the monarchy for their children's safety. Every milestone, every press conference, every lawsuit, all now tainted by one burning question: is Archie even mine? Meanwhile, Meghan has remained publicly silent. Her legal team has issued no statements. Her publicist, when contacted by journalists, simply said, "No comment." But insiders say the walls are closing in. Amal has made it clear, this was not a threat. It was a warning. And more evidence, she says, will surface if Harry chooses to ignore it. The royal institution, already weary of scandal fatigue, is said to be watching closely but carefully. King Charles, still managing his own health concerns and a fragile monarchy, has reportedly received a full copy of the DNA report through private diplomatic channels. And Prince William, according to one high-ranking royal aide, is furious, not just at Meghan, but at Harry for potentially dragging the family into yet another storm. What will Harry do next? Will he demand a second test? Will he confront George Clooney? Will he go public? Or will he bury the truth, like so many secrets before? That's the story we are about to uncover. From the origins of this alleged affair to the cold forensic reality of DNA, from Amal's growing arsenal of evidence to the royal family's behind-the-scenes panic, this is a story of power, betrayal, silence, and survival. And whether you believe it or not, one thing is certain. This changes everything. It wasn't a letter couriered by an assistant. It wasn't slipped into a mailbox, nor passed through royal channels. It came the old-fashioned way. By hand, through a trusted intermediary, under the radar of security and without any official seal. The only clue to its importance was the sheer effort taken to deliver it in person to a man whose life was already unraveling under the weight of royal drama, press scrutiny, and marital suspicion. Inside a private Montecito security checkpoint, one of Prince Harry's senior household staff received a visit from a woman wearing dark sunglasses, a tailored black trench coat, and a resolute expression. She gave no name. She simply said, "This is for the Duke. He'll understand once he opens it. Please don't delay." Then she vanished before they could ask a single question. The envelope was ivory white, heavy, and unmarked, except for a single word handwritten in blue ink across the back fold: personal. No return address. No courier markings. No indication that it had come from across the Atlantic. It was placed on Harry's desk alongside a few press clippings and diplomatic briefings, none of which would matter after what he read next. Harry had been in a foul mood that morning. His night had been restless. Meghan had left early for a supposed wellness retreat an hour up the coast, citing stress and the need to disconnect. The timing felt off. They had just argued the night before, over what? He could barely recall anymore. It was always the same stew of miscommunications, silences, and resentments now. But something had shifted in the air recently. Meghan's mood had changed. Her posture. The way she spoke to him. Cold but careful, like someone hiding in plain sight. He poured himself a coffee and sat down, eyeing the envelope with guarded curiosity. A flick of the thumb opened the seal. Then the world, as he knew it, cracked. Inside the envelope were two items: a folded packet with the unmistakable look of a laboratory report and a thin bundle of high-resolution photographs. Tucked beneath them was a handwritten note on Amal Clooney's personal stationery. Elegant, serifed font, heavyweight cardstock. Only a few lines were written. "Harry, I never thought I would do this, but I can't carry this truth any longer. I've confirmed what I feared. You need to see it for yourself. This is not about revenge. This is about your right to know. Handle it as you see fit. Amal." He felt his breath tighten as he opened the packet. The lab report was clear, methodical, and professional. It showed a parentage comparison between two male DNA samples. One labeled as Subject A, George Timothy Clooney. The other was clearly indicated as Subject B, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. The result: probability of paternity, 99.87%. Harry sat back, stunned. His hands started to shake. His first instinct was disbelief. Surely this was a hoax, some elaborate prank by tabloids, or maybe even Russian hackers. But no, the report bore the name of a legitimate European genetics laboratory, one used by celebrities and dignitaries to discreetly verify paternity and ancestry. A facility known for its discretion and its deadly accuracy. Then he looked at the photos. Each image was dated, time-stamped, some in black and white, others in vivid color. Meghan, George. Intimate moments captured over the span of nearly 5 years. From a cozy London cafe in early 2017 to a lakeside property in Como just months before Archie's birth. One picture stood out more than the others: George and Meghan walking down a hallway together, her hand grazing his chest, his face leaning into hers as if whispering something private. The body language unmistakable. Harry dropped the images. He pressed his palms into his eyes. How had he not seen it? George had always been around in the early days. He and Amal attended the wedding. He had flown Meghan to his private villa for rest. They had even shared a table at multiple charity galas in Canada and Los Angeles. George had often spoken out in defense of Meghan publicly, sometimes even more passionately than Harry himself. And the press had eaten it up. No one had ever questioned it. Until now. Now the images whispered a different story. Now, every shared glance, every casual touch, looked loaded with intent. The timing, Harry realized, was horrifyingly precise. The Villa Oleandra visit in Italy took place roughly 7.5 months before Archie's birth. At the time, Meghan had told the press she was visiting Amal for rest and girl time. George had reportedly flown out midweek on a quick work trip, but returned within 24 hours. No one asked why, but Amal had. According to insider accounts from a former household employee at the Clooney estate, Amal had begun to suspect her husband's behavior after discovering hidden text messages on a backup device stored in their wine cellar. One particular message stood out. "Don't worry, it'll be our secret, M." There was no contact name, but there was a linked image from a cloud backup. Meghan, smiling, wearing a robe. The metadata revealed the date, August 2018. That was the moment Amal allegedly snapped. From that point on, she launched a quiet but calculated campaign to uncover the truth. She didn't go to the media. She didn't even confront George directly at first. She hired a retired MI6 investigator, someone she had met during her international human rights cases, to help her trace George's movements, access private jet manifests, and build a timeline. It took nearly 2 years. But when she finally had what she needed, she sent it directly to the man whose life it would fracture the most: Harry. The delivery was timed perfectly. Amal knew Meghan was out of the house that morning. She knew Harry had a habit of checking his mail and private briefings first thing. She also knew that if she confronted George, he would deny it. And if she confronted Meghan, the story would disappear. But Harry? Harry would feel it. He would read it. He would digest it. And eventually, he would act. And act, he did, though slowly. In the hours following the delivery, Harry canceled a scheduled Zoom appearance. He ignored 3 calls from King Charles. He even turned off his phone entirely by late afternoon. He didn't eat. He didn't speak. He walked the grounds of their Montecito property like a ghost, haunted not just by the betrayal, but by the sheer magnitude of what it could mean. For years, Harry had defended Meghan at all costs. From the British tabloids to royal courtiers, he had gone to war with the world for her. But in that moment, with Amal's evidence in his hands, he realized something else. Maybe the world hadn't been entirely wrong. Maybe he had been the one living in a delusion. More damning was the silence from Meghan herself. When she returned later that evening, Harry said nothing. He watched her walk through the door, set down her handbag, and head upstairs. He didn't ask where she had been. He didn't accuse her. He didn't reveal what he had received. He simply stared at her like a man drowning in truth, trying not to scream. And she, in turn, said nothing either. Somewhere between their shared silence was a truth neither one could fully admit. What Amal had done wasn't just about marriage. It was about dignity. It was about protecting her own children, her own name, and possibly, some might argue, protecting Harry from a life built on a lie. The package wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of a slow-burning reckoning that would stretch from the beaches of Montecito to the gates of Windsor. Amal had struck the first blow, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. And now, Harry would have to decide, who was he, really? A prince? A father? A husband? A pawn? Or something else entirely? Because once truth knocks on your door, it doesn't leave quietly. It demands to be heard. Before the crown, before Montecito, before the royal headlines, and long before DNA tests entered the equation, there was Meghan Markle, a rising actress filming a cable drama in Toronto and slowly inching her way into elite philanthropic circles. Her breakout role as Rachel Zane on Suits had earned her a measure of recognition, but it was her growing ambition off-screen, networking, charity work, UN speeches that hinted at something far greater. At this time, George Clooney was already an icon, Hollywood royalty, a silver-haired statesman of the entertainment world, known as much for his suave on-screen presence as for his political engagement and carefully curated public image. His marriage to Amal Clooney had cemented him as a global figure, a man with one foot in Hollywood and the other in high-level diplomacy. What wasn't widely known was just how often those two worlds collided behind closed doors. Sources say the first real interaction between Meghan and George wasn't at some glamorous party or film premiere. It was at a closed-door roundtable on international press freedom in Toronto. Amal had been invited to speak, and George, traveling with her, attended in support. Meghan, eager to build her credibility as more than just a TV star, had scored an invitation through her then-close friend, Canadian stylist Jessica Mulroney. By all accounts, their first meeting was brief, but electric. Meghan, intelligent and assertive, struck up a conversation with George about media portrayal, activism, and the role of celebrity in driving global change. Witnesses described their exchange as animated, intense, and surprisingly comfortable. One event coordinator recalled it clearly. She wasn't nervous around him at all. In fact, it felt like she was interviewing him, challenging him. George seemed caught off guard, in a good way. It was the kind of rapport you rarely see between two people meeting for the first time. That single encounter might have passed without further consequence, except it didn't. According to a former Suits crew member, Clooney sent Meghan a personal note a few days later, thanking her for the conversation and encouraging her to keep using her voice. It was typed, formal, harmless on the surface, but insiders suggest that this note marked the beginning of a line of communication that continued discreetly over time. Emails, forwarded articles, the occasional recommendation to attend or speak at certain events. Amal reportedly wasn't concerned at first. She was used to her husband's magnetism, and she herself was navigating the pressures of balancing law, motherhood, and the global spotlight. Meghan, meanwhile, was still publicly involved with Canadian chef Corey Vitiello, though the relationship had begun to show cracks. Then came Meghan's increasing involvement in humanitarian work. A UN women advocate and vocal critic of gender inequality, she began appearing at more high-profile engagements. Coincidentally, or not, George Clooney was often seen attending or sponsoring similar events. According to a hotel insider in Davos, Switzerland, Meghan and George were spotted sharing a private drink at the Belvedere Hotel Lounge in 2016 during the World Economic Forum. At that time, Meghan had not yet met Prince Harry. The meeting was described as friendly, not romantic, but not purely professional either. Photographs exist, though none have yet been released publicly. The timing, however, aligns with when Meghan began speaking about feeling unseen and underestimated, sentiments she would later echo during royal interviews. When Meghan finally did meet Harry in the summer of 2016, some suggest the dynamic between her and George didn't vanish, it merely went underground. At this point, George was seen as a helpful supporter of Meghan's humanitarian goals. A friend, a mentor, nothing more. But some staffers at Soho House, where Harry and Meghan had several early dates, noticed a strange pattern. Clooney was frequently at the same locations, not always on the same night, but often within a day or two. A bartender later said, it was odd. George would show up, low profile, no entourage. He'd stay for an hour or two, chat with people, and leave. Meghan was always around that circle at the same time. It felt coordinated, though we didn't ask questions. Then came the wedding in 2018. The Clooneys were among the surprise guests, seated in a prestigious pew at St. George's Chapel, alongside royal cousins and dignitaries. It raised eyebrows. While Amal had worked on international legal issues and may have had ties to the royal legal team, George's inclusion, especially with such high visibility, made little sense to many observers. Later reports revealed that George and Meghan had spent time together at his Lake Como estate in the weeks following the wedding. Officially, the visit included both Harry and Meghan. But discrepancies in travel logs and whispers from resort staff suggested that Meghan had arrived earlier than Harry and stayed behind longer. It was during this post-wedding period that Amal allegedly began to grow suspicious. An anonymous member of the Clooneys' domestic staff described how Amal's demeanor shifted. She was watching everything: George's travel, his moods, the way he reacted whenever Meghan's name came up. It wasn't rage. It was calculation. Amal doesn't explode. She investigates. One of the most curious elements emerged from Clooney's philanthropic schedule. There were repeated instances in which George and Meghan appeared at overlapping events, sometimes in the same city, even the same venue, without ever being photographed together. Almost as if their appearances had been coordinated but intentionally staggered. At a gala for a children's health initiative in Vancouver in late 2017, Meghan gave a speech as a UN Women ambassador. George had flown in the day before to meet with the events board. Though they were never seen on the red carpet at the same time, a valet attendant recalled seeing them in the same black SUV later that evening, seated side by side. The valet wasn't alone. A security staffer for one of the evening's sponsors said they weren't acting like strangers. You can tell when people have a kind of shorthand, little glances, body language, proximity. They were comfortable in a way that stood out. But the real firestorm began when Amal, according to a whistleblower close to the Clooney legal circle, accessed travel records through a private agency she had worked with in the past. What she found reportedly confirmed her suspicions. There were at least 6 instances over a 3-year period in which George Clooney and Meghan Markle had overlapping travel bookings to the same destination, with either identical or near-identical departure and arrival times, yet from different airlines. To throw off any scent. From Vancouver to Milan, New York to Ibiza. It wasn't proof of an affair. But it was enough to push Amal from silent suspicion to action. Her first move wasn't to confront George. It was to observe. She hired a private investigator, a former intelligence consultant who specialized in celebrity security breaches and illicit affairs among elites. Over the course of 10 months, the investigator gathered surveillance images, communications metadata, and eventually medical access that allowed for the covert collection of a biological sample. The sample in question came not from Meghan or Archie directly, but from a shared surface within a hotel suite during a weekend where George and Meghan had allegedly been together, according to room service records and security logs. That sample was preserved and later compared to a known sample of George's DNA. When the match came back as highly compatible with a first-degree relationship, Amal took the next step. She hired a second lab, this one in Switzerland. Anonymous, elite, discreet. This time, the test was not just for compatibility. It was for paternity, and the result left her no choice. By then, Meghan had already given birth. The royal couple had relocated to California. Harry had begun legal battles with the British press, and Netflix was preparing its rollout of their production company's content. On the surface, everything was stable. But Amal was holding a truth that could shatter all of it. She waited. Many believe it was the release of Harry and Meghan, the Netflix docuseries, that finally pushed her to act. In it, Meghan painted herself once again as the victim of a cruel institution. George and Amal were mentioned only in passing. But Amal allegedly found Meghan's portrayal manipulative, even weaponized. Not just against the royal family, but against the truth Amal had buried for too long. And so, she gathered the files. She sealed the envelope. And she sent it to the one person who, above all, needed to see it for himself. Prince Harry. What began as a single conversation in a Toronto ballroom had grown into a sprawling timeline of potential deceit. Meghan and George had crossed paths more times than anyone suspected. And now, with photographic evidence and scientific confirmation, the shadows cast over their relationship could no longer be ignored. The world may never know exactly what happened behind closed doors. But the outline was clear. A powerful woman, a charming man, a rising star with ambition, and a royal marriage built atop a foundation that may have never been entirely stable to begin with. The truth had been buried, until Amal Clooney decided to dig it up. To understand the depth of the alleged affair between Meghan Markle and George Clooney, one must follow the breadcrumbs, scattered fragments of time, subtle anomalies in schedules, carefully guarded encounters, and hushed voices behind velvet curtains. Nothing was blatant. There were no public declarations or scandalous tabloid splashes at the time. Instead, what emerged was a complex mosaic of whispers, patterns, and proximity that, when stitched together, revealed a portrait of two high-profile individuals navigating an invisible line between friendship and something far more intimate. The first piece of the puzzle begins in the spring of 2016, several months before Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry became known to the public. At this time, Meghan had already crossed paths with the Clooneys at the aforementioned Press Freedom Summit in Toronto. What followed in the months after was a rapid increase in her presence at charity events that bore the Clooney Foundation's name or shared its partners. Between April and July of that year, Meghan attended 3 separate events in New York, Milan, and London, all under the umbrella of humanitarian causes. George Clooney, notably, was either a co-chair, speaker, or sponsor at each one. Though never photographed together at these events, insiders at each location later confirmed that both Meghan and George were on the premises at overlapping times. In May 2016, George traveled to Milan for a United Nations World Food Program gala, held at the historic Palazzo Serbelloni. Meghan, on break from filming Suits, was reportedly staying at a boutique hotel less than 5 minutes away. The official record stated she was vacationing with a friend. However, a hotel manager, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed that George Clooney was also a guest that weekend, checking in under a known pseudonym he often used while traveling privately. The manager said they were careful. Not once were they seen entering or exiting together. But the concierge had orders to arrange late-night dining services for both rooms, identical meals, identical times. One room would request it first. 10 minutes later, the same request came from the other. The next data point emerged in July 2016, a high-profile celebrity charity auction in London, raising funds for Syrian refugees. Amal Clooney delivered a keynote address. Meghan, again, was quietly in attendance, this time under the guise of supporting a friend in media who had secured a guest pass for her. They were never spotted side by side, but multiple attendees reported seeing Meghan standing in the back during George's speech, applauding longer than most and disappearing moments before the reception began. The timing was uncanny. The frequency of overlap grew suspicious. But the turning point came later that summer, when Meghan began dating Prince Harry. The media would eventually trace their first official meeting to July 2016, during a private dinner arranged by mutual friends. What remained unacknowledged in all those stories was that George Clooney was in London during the very same week, ostensibly for a film meeting, yet with no public appearances scheduled. By fall 2016, Harry and Meghan's relationship was becoming serious, at least on paper. But whispers among palace insiders suggested something was already off. Meghan's frequent trips back to Toronto, where George and Amal were known to spend time at a secluded property just outside the city, continued well into her courtship with Harry. And while she never openly spoke of George, her conversations with stylists and friends often included vague references to a mentor or a friend who understood the pressures of celebrity. In early 2017, shortly after Meghan and Harry's relationship became public, the affair timeline took a more strategic shape. According to a private aviation source, George Clooney's Gulfstream jet landed in Toronto under diplomatic clearance just 4 days after Harry left the city following a surprise visit. The official explanation was business. The unofficial story? George stayed only 36 hours, never leaving the hotel, a hotel that Meghan was also seen entering that same night. That same week, a stylist who worked on Suits revealed that Meghan had taken an unscheduled 2-day break from filming, citing a personal emergency. When she returned to set, she was radiant, energetic, and unusually private about where she had been. One of her co-stars asked jokingly if she had eloped. Meghan reportedly laughed, then went silent. More unusual still were the photos that began to emerge, none explicitly incriminating, but all suggestive. A grainy paparazzi image taken in Venice in April 2017 showed a woman believed to be Meghan boarding a small water taxi at dusk. George Clooney was spotted at the same hotel that week, attending an event for an Italian film school. The timing was within 24 hours. The image was quietly scrubbed from multiple media outlets shortly after it was published. Later that year, an event took place that, in hindsight, became a cornerstone of the timeline, Meghan and Harry's appearance at the wedding of a close friend in Jamaica. George was not on the guest list, but one of the resort staff claimed he saw a man matching George's description arriving by private car 2 days before the wedding and departing the same evening. No photos, no confirmation, but the rumor never fully died down. By the time of Meghan and Harry's engagement announcement in November 2017, palace officials had grown weary of speculation. Rumors of Meghan's past romances and possible lingering connections were carefully suppressed, but a single document that later emerged, an internal palace advisory warning Harry about the public optics of overexposing connections with Hollywood, hinted that more was known behind the scenes. The timeline took a sharper turn post-marriage. In the summer of 2018, Meghan and Harry visited George and Amal Clooney at their Lake Como estate. The visit was officially labeled a friendly weekend retreat, but multiple sources, including security staff and Italian media informants, suggested that Harry and George were rarely in the same room. George spent the majority of the weekend hosting meetings and taking calls, while Meghan and Amal were said to be exploring the grounds or relaxing by the pool. But it was the day before Harry arrived that drew the most attention. Meghan had flown in early, alone, and spent nearly 24 hours at the estate before Harry joined her. Clooney's personal chef, who later left the household under bitter circumstances, allegedly confided that George and Meghan dined together privately that evening on the upper terrace, far away from staff and guests. No other personnel were permitted on the floor during those hours. The chef's parting words, recorded in a leaked deposition during an unrelated labor dispute, were telling. "I cook for many guests, but some dinners feel different." That night, the silence between courses said more than any words. In early 2019, Meghan gave birth to Archie. The announcement was met with celebration and some confusion. The location of the birth was unclear. The timeline of the pregnancy had subtle inconsistencies, and the baby's resemblance, while certainly subjective, was quietly questioned in certain elite circles. Around this same time, George Clooney made several public statements defending Meghan in interviews. He compared her treatment by the media to that of Princess Diana, warned of harassment, and went out of his way to praise her intelligence and grace. He called her kind, smart, and poised, and insisted that the press leave her alone. What struck many observers, however, was how emotional he seemed. More emotional than Harry, even. The final known crossover on the timeline occurred during the Sussexes' North American transition in 2020. Meghan and Harry had just exited royal duties. They relocated briefly to Canada before settling in California. During this relocation period, George was seen in Vancouver under what was claimed to be film-related business. Local reporters who tried to track his movements discovered that he had no official schedule. His visit lasted only 48 hours. Meghan was in Vancouver at the same time. Without Harry, who had flown to the UK to finalize legal issues with the palace, the pattern had repeated: shared locations, private time, no photos, and the lingering suspicion that something more was happening beneath the surface. When Amal Clooney finally confronted the affair with evidence, the timeline she compiled reportedly filled over 100 pages. It included security footage, private travel logs, communications metadata, and testimonials from former staff. In that report were 17 documented instances of George and Meghan being in the same city, same building, or even same room without publicly acknowledging each other, across a span of nearly 5 years. And while none of this proves intent, romance, or paternity on its own, the pattern was impossible to ignore. It was a thread that, when pulled, began to unravel the entire tapestry. What was once dismissed as tabloid fantasy now stood on the precipice of becoming royal crisis fact. Meghan and George had always claimed to be friends. But how many secrets can friendship hold before it collapses under its own weight? The moment when a truth no one wanted to face became undeniable did not arrive with a headline or a leaked conversation. It arrived quietly, clinically, with cold scientific certainty, the kind that leaves no room for denial, no space for spin or speculation. The DNA report Amal Clooney sent to Prince Harry was more than just a piece of paper. It was a seismic revelation that threatened to topple not only a family but the very foundations of identity, loyalty, and trust. It began months before the delivery of the explosive package, long before Harry sat alone in his study, staring blankly at the page that would change everything. Amal, equipped with the knowledge she had painstakingly gathered over years, made one final, irreversible decision. She would have the truth confirmed by science. The process itself was meticulous and guarded. Because this was no ordinary paternity test, it demanded absolute precision, discretion, an airtight chain of custody protocols. Amal knew that any misstep could allow the story to leak prematurely, ruin reputations without proof, or worse, derail the entire mission. Her first challenge was obtaining genetic material from Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor without alerting the Sussexes or their extensive security detail. According to sources familiar with the investigation, Amal's team discreetly secured a discarded sample of Archie's DNA, a piece of used tissue from a private medical consultation that had been stored temporarily at a confidential clinic known for its elite clientele. This sample was then matched with DNA from George Clooney, which had been previously collected during routine medical exams and stored securely by Amal. The samples were transported to one of Europe's most reputable private genetics laboratories, a discreet, high-security facility specializing in confidential testing for high-profile cases. The lab's reputation was impeccable. They were known for their accuracy, impartiality, and silence. When the lab technicians ran the tests, the results were unequivocal. The probability of paternity was 87% in favor of George Clooney being Archie's biological father. In the world of genetics, such a result is almost irrefutable. The implications, however, were anything but simple. Amal herself was reportedly devastated. Though this revelation confirmed her suspicions, it also marked the unraveling of multiple lives intertwined with secrecy and betrayal. She penned a brief but pointed letter to Harry, urging him to confront the truth head-on. Harry's initial reaction was disbelief mixed with a profound sense of betrayal. For months following the receipt of the evidence, he oscillated between denial and despair. According to trusted confidants, he questioned whether this could be some elaborate hoax or a sinister plot engineered by the British tabloids or political rivals. But the more he scrutinized the data, the less plausible denial became. The DNA evidence was not just a legal document. It was a declaration that forced Harry to question his reality. Had the son he had loved and fought for all these years truly belonged to him? Or had Meghan's private life been more complicated and darker than he ever imagined? This truth shattered the very core of his identity as a father, a husband, and a prince. Even more wrenching was the question of timing. Meghan's pregnancy had been publicly announced in October 2018, with the baby born in May 2019. The DNA timelines placed George Clooney's paternity as biologically consistent with intimate relations during the period when Meghan and Harry had reportedly spent significant time apart. During that time, Meghan was known to travel extensively, attending events in Europe, North America, and Africa, often accompanied by George. In private conversations, Amal alleged that George and Meghan's relationship was not a one-time occurrence, but a sustained affair, a fact that would explain the strong genetic link. This shattered the facade of Meghan as a devoted wife and mother, raising questions about trust, fidelity, and the very nature of their union. The fallout from the DNA revelation quickly moved beyond the private sphere. Harry's inner circle found themselves caught between loyalty and doubt. Some urged him to demand a second test, insisting that the first might be contaminated or falsified. Others warned that confronting Meghan would only deepen the divide and risk a public scandal of unimaginable proportions. Harry chose silence at first, but silence is a volatile thing. It breeds rumors, fuels suspicion, and erodes confidence. At the same time, word of Amal's evidence began to leak through unofficial channels. A trusted aide within the Clooney camp reportedly confided to a journalist. This is the kind of truth that no one wants to believe, but when the science speaks, you can't ignore it. Palace officials, meanwhile, were caught in a delicate balancing act. On one hand, they were fiercely protective of the royal family's image. On the other, they understood the gravity of the claim and the potential damage it could wreak. According to sources close to the palace, King Charles ordered an independent inquiry to verify the authenticity of the DNA report, a move that suggested both caution and acknowledgement that the matter could not be swept under the rug. For Harry, the inquiry was a torment. He found himself trapped in a liminal space between public duty and private pain, between loyalty to his wife and love for his son, between denial and acceptance. When he finally confronted Meghan, the encounter was tense and fraught with emotion. A close friend described the meeting as a powder keg ready to explode. Meghan reportedly denied any wrongdoing, dismissing the DNA results as fabricated or manipulated by enemies seeking to destroy her. But Harry's faith was shaken. The man who had once proclaimed that he would stand by Meghan no matter what now found himself questioning every moment, every conversation, every vow. In the days following the confrontation, Harry retreated from public view. His schedule cleared. Interviews were canceled. The man who once seemed invincible was now vulnerable. The media, sensing the storm, began to speculate wildly. Headlines questioned Meghan's fidelity. Rumors of secret lovers and hidden lives swirled across tabloids and social media. The Sussexes' carefully managed image began to unravel before their eyes. Amal Clooney's decision to send the DNA evidence was not a reckless act of vengeance. It was a calculated move grounded in a belief that truth, however painful, was better than a life lived in deception. Her lawyer friends have described her as a woman of principle, willing to sacrifice her own peace to protect the innocent. For Amal, that innocence was Harry. The man she believed deserved to know the truth about his family. The wider public watched in stunned silence as the scandal unfolded, caught between disbelief and morbid curiosity. Some rallied behind Harry, sympathizing with a man betrayed by those closest to him. Others condemned Meghan, accusing her of manipulation and deceit. The legal implications were equally profound. Questions arose over Archie's official status, inheritance rights, and even security clearances. If George Clooney was the biological father, what did that mean for the line of succession? For royal protocols? For the fragile relationship between the Sussexes and the crown? All these questions hung unanswered, like a shadow looming over the royal family. But for Harry, the most difficult question remained: how to reconcile the love for a child with the betrayal of a wife? How to protect a son whose paternity was now contested in the harsh light of science? And how to move forward when the foundation of everything he believed in was shaken to its core? The receipt of Amal Clooney's envelope marked the beginning of a profound personal crisis for Prince Harry. It was not just the content, the DNA report and photographs, that shattered his world, but the emotional and psychological aftermath that followed. For the first time in his public life, Harry faced a private agony so intense that it left him isolated, speechless, and broken. In the days following the discovery, those closest to Harry noticed a stark change. The once energetic, confident prince became withdrawn and guarded. His usual warmth replaced by a haunted look, his smile faded into a mask of fatigue. Staff reported that he canceled engagements without explanation, avoided phone calls from friends and family, and spent long hours alone on the sprawling grounds of his Montecito estate. Several confidants revealed that Harry entered a period of deep reflection, wrestling with conflicting emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak. His internal struggle was compounded by the public pressures he faced as a royal and a husband. The immediate aftermath was silence. No denials. No statements. Just a painful quiet that left the media and public speculating wildly. Harry's reluctance to address the rumors fueled further rumors, creating a feedback loop of doubt and mistrust. One close friend described Harry's state: he's torn apart. The man who once faced the world head-on is now afraid to confront his own reality. It's like watching someone you love disappear piece by piece. Privately, Harry sought counsel from a handful of trusted advisors, psychologists, legal experts, and old friends from his military days. These sessions revealed a man struggling with identity and purpose. The DNA bombshell was more than a family scandal. It was an existential crisis. The question of paternity struck at the heart of Harry's self-image as a father. He had fought fiercely for Archie's safety and well-being. He had publicly expressed his devotion and pride as a parent. Now, the foundations of that role were called into question by science and secrecy. Adding to the turmoil was Meghan's response. When Harry confronted her with the evidence, according to sources, she reacted with denial and anger. She dismissed the DNA findings as fabricated and accused Amal of orchestrating a campaign to destroy their family. The confrontation fractured their relationship. What had once been a united front against external pressures began to crumble from within. The couple's previously reported emotional closeness gave way to cold silences and growing mistrust. Harry's isolation deepened as the royal family watched from a distance. King Charles and Prince William reportedly attempted to reach out, urging him to seek counseling and reconsider his position. But Harry was reportedly reluctant to engage, feeling betrayed on multiple fronts. Social media and tabloid frenzy added another layer of pressure. Fans and critics alike debated Harry's credibility, Meghan's character, and the implications for the monarchy. The relentless scrutiny left Harry feeling besieged, trapped between his private pain and public persona. According to leaked communications, Harry considered making a public statement to clear the air, but was advised against it by legal and PR experts who feared it would only escalate the scandal. Instead, he retreated further, seeking solace in the quiet of his estate and the companionship of close confidants. He reportedly avoided contact with media and limited his public appearances to near invisibility. Therapists who spoke anonymously about Harry's condition described symptoms consistent with deep emotional trauma, anxiety, sleeplessness, and bouts of depression. Yet, despite his struggles, Harry remained resolute about uncovering the full truth and protecting his son. Throughout this period, Harry's sense of loyalty was tested. Would he stand by Meghan despite the evidence? Or would he confront the reality that his marriage, and possibly his family, was built on deception? His choices remained private, but the strain was evident to those around him. One royal insider noted, "Harry is a man caught between love and betrayal. His heart says one thing, but the facts say another. It's a war within himself that no one else can win." The crisis also exposed fissures in Harry's relationship with other family members. Some accused him of ignoring warnings and being blinded by affection. Others sympathized, understanding the profound pain of a father's doubt. As the days turned to weeks, Harry's silence spoke volumes. It was a silence filled with questions no one dared ask aloud. Who was Archie really? What did this mean for Harry's future as a father, husband, and prince? Could trust ever be rebuilt? And most poignantly, how does a man reclaim his identity when everything he believed has been called into question? Harry's journey through shock, silence, and isolation was far from over. It was a crucible that would shape his decisions for years to come, decisions that could redefine not only his family but the monarchy itself. In the aftermath of the DNA revelations and Prince Harry's withdrawal into silence, Buckingham Palace found itself at a crossroads. The institution, steeped in centuries of tradition and protocol, was suddenly confronted with a scandal unlike any it had faced in recent memory. A scandal that threatened to upend the royal family's carefully constructed image and raise uncomfortable questions about lineage and loyalty. Behind the palace's grand facades and historic halls, an intense but discreet response was underway. There was no public statement, no press conference, no attempt to quash the rumors outright. Instead, the palace adopted a strategy of cautious observation and private investigation. At the heart of this operation was King Charles, who had reportedly been briefed in confidence shortly after Amal Clooney sent the envelope to Harry. A seasoned royal accustomed to managing crises with a combination of diplomacy and discretion, Charles was said to be deeply troubled by the potential ramifications. Senior palace aides convened emergency meetings to assess the situation. The primary concerns were clear: the veracity of the DNA report, the potential fallout for the monarchy, and the preservation of family unity. One insider described the mood as tense but controlled, emphasizing that the palace's first priority was to verify the evidence before taking any action. To that end, an independent panel of trusted medical and forensic experts was quietly assembled to review the DNA findings and confirm their authenticity. This panel operated under strict confidentiality agreements, and their investigations were conducted with the utmost sensitivity to the parties involved. In parallel, the palace legal team began preparing for all possible outcomes. This included considerations of the legal status of Archie Harrison, inheritance rights, and the implications for royal titles. Legal experts also explored the potential impact on privacy laws and media management strategies. Prince William, as the heir apparent, was reportedly briefed regularly on developments. His reaction, according to palace sources, was one of frustration and concern. William was said to have urged calm and caution, emphasizing the need to protect the family's reputation while supporting his brother through this difficult period. However, the dynamics between the brothers became strained as the scandal deepened. Some insiders suggested William was critical of Harry's reluctance to address the allegations publicly, fearing that silence only fueled speculation. Meanwhile, the palace communications team prepared a range of contingency plans. These included carefully worded statements that could be deployed if the situation escalated into a full-blown public crisis. Their goal was to control the narrative without drawing unnecessary attention to the details of the paternity dispute. Interestingly, the palace also engaged in discreet outreach to key figures within the media to gauge potential public reaction and advise on responsible reporting. This was a delicate balancing act, protecting privacy while managing the inevitable media storm. At the same time, palace officials monitored social media closely. Hashtags and trending topics related to the scandal began circulating, and public opinion showed signs of polarization. Some sympathized with Harry as a victim of betrayal, others questioned Meghan's integrity. The palace recognized that public sentiment could influence the crisis's trajectory and was preparing strategies accordingly. Notably, Princess Anne reportedly took a firm stance within the family, advocating for transparency and urging members to confront the issue head-on. Sources suggest she believed that avoiding the topic would only worsen the damage in the long run. In private conversations, some senior royals expressed concern that the scandal might undermine public confidence in the monarchy at a time when its relevance was already being questioned. Others worried about the impact on the younger generation of royals, including Prince George and Princess Charlotte. Despite the internal turmoil, Buckingham Palace maintained a public facade of normalcy. Official engagements continued, royal statements focused on charitable work and community outreach, and the traditional calendar of events proceeded without interruption. However, those familiar with palace operations noted that behind the scenes, the atmosphere was palpably different, more guarded, more strategic, and charged with a sense of impending upheaval. The palace's quiet response also extended to diplomatic channels. Given George Clooney's international stature and Amal Clooney's legal prominence, communications between the palace and the Clooney camp were reportedly initiated through private envoys to discuss the sensitive matter without attracting public attention. These discreet negotiations aimed to manage the situation delicately and prevent it from spilling into an uncontrollable public scandal. At the core of Buckingham Palace's response was a profound dilemma: how to reconcile the need for truth and accountability with the preservation of tradition, dignity, and family loyalty. As the DNA scandal unfolded, the palace was forced to confront questions it had long avoided. Questions about the personal lives of its members and the vulnerabilities hidden beneath regal facades. For King Charles and his inner circle, the challenge was clear: to navigate this unprecedented crisis with grace, discretion, and a commitment to protecting both the monarchy and the individuals involved. The quiet response was a testament to the palace's understanding that sometimes the most profound battles are fought in silence, away from the glare of public scrutiny. But as the story spread and tensions rose, it became increasingly clear that silence could only last so long. Buckingham Palace was preparing for a storm, one that could reshape the royal family's future in ways few had imagined. Behind the glamorous facade of the Clooney family, far from the bright lights of Hollywood and the public adulation, a crisis was quietly unfolding that threatened to tear apart one of the most admired couples of the modern era. Amal and George Clooney, whose union had long been held up as a symbol of strength, sophistication, and shared ideals, were now facing a personal tempest fueled by betrayal, suspicion, and the exposure of deeply guarded secrets. When Amal first suspected that George might be involved in an affair with Meghan Markle, it wasn't a sudden shock, but rather the culmination of months, if not years, of subtle signs, inexplicable absences, and whispers she could no longer ignore. Friends close to Amal describe her initial reaction as a mixture of disbelief and determination: disbelief that the man she had trusted could betray her, and determination to uncover the full truth no matter the cost. The domestic staff at the Clooney estate in Lake Como recalled how Amal became increasingly vigilant, scrutinizing every detail of George's movements and communications. Private investigators were engaged, with extensive surveillance and data collection quietly underway. Yet, the emotional toll on Amal was profound. Despite her public image as a composed human rights lawyer, privately, Amal wrestled with feelings of anger, hurt, and confusion. The thought that her husband might have fathered a child with another woman, especially one as close to the royal family as Meghan Markle, was an unbearable betrayal. Her interactions with George grew tense and fraught. While he maintained his public appearances and charitable work with his usual charm, their private conversations reportedly became cold and clipped. An insider close to the couple revealed, Amal tried to get answers. George was evasive. They stopped sharing details about their days. The distance between them widened. The couple's children, twins Ella and Alexander, were shielded as much as possible, but the household atmosphere inevitably shifted. Nannies and tutors reported an undercurrent of tension, a palpable change in Amal's demeanor that trickled down to the entire staff. Amal's career, too, became a focal point of this personal struggle. Known worldwide for her legal work defending human rights and fighting for justice, she found herself balancing the weight of a global reputation with the private agony of marital uncertainty. Sources say Amal confided in close friends and legal colleagues about her resolve not to let personal betrayal undermine her professional commitments. She told them that truth and justice are principles she lives by, no matter how painful the consequences. The moment she received the conclusive DNA report, Amal faced a crossroads. She could have chosen silence, maintaining the Clooney family's privacy and avoiding public scandal. Instead, she made a deliberate decision to inform Prince Harry. The reasons behind this choice remain a matter of speculation. Some suggest it was an act of empathy toward Harry, a man she believed was being deceived. Others argue it was a stand against dishonesty and manipulation. Regardless, the move was bold and irreversible. George's response to Amal's discovery was complicated. Insiders describe him as deeply conflicted, torn between loyalty to his family and the realities unveiled by the evidence. Publicly, he has remained largely silent, issuing only measured statements defending Meghan and denying any impropriety. Privately, however, the Clooney marriage was said to be unraveling. Friends reported that Amal and George began spending more time apart, with Amal seeking refuge in her legal work and George retreating to film projects and philanthropic commitments. Rumors circulated of heated arguments, late-night phone calls, and emotional confrontations that left both parties exhausted. Yet, neither chose to make their private struggles public. Legal experts suggest that the Clooneys began consulting with top family law attorneys, weighing options ranging from separation to formal divorce proceedings. But according to sources close to Amal, she was reluctant to take that step, holding on to hope for resolution and reconciliation. The strain extended beyond the couple. Their extended social circle, including Hollywood elite and international diplomats, found themselves navigating delicate conversations and managing their own public images. Some acquaintances expressed shock and disappointment, recalling a marriage that seemed unshakable. Others acknowledged the complex realities that come with fame, power, and public scrutiny. As the scandal involving Meghan Markle and Prince Harry escalated, the Clooney household became a focal point for media attention, though the family fiercely guarded their privacy. Paparazzi attempted to capture images of Amal and George together, but they remained elusive, rarely seen in public simultaneously. In a rare moment captured by a paparazzo in late 2024, Amal was photographed leaving a legal conference in London, looking composed but weary. Observers noted the absence of George, fueling further speculation about the state of their relationship. Amal's friends report that she has channeled much of her pain into her advocacy, launching new initiatives focused on justice for women and children, perhaps as a means of coping with her personal turmoil. Despite the upheaval, Amal remains committed to protecting her children's privacy and maintaining a semblance of normalcy amid chaos. The crisis within the Clooney household illustrates a stark contrast between the public's perception of celebrity marriages and the hidden realities that often lie beneath. It also raises profound questions about loyalty, truth, and the price of secrecy. In the end, Amal Clooney's decision to confront the affair head-on, armed with evidence and a determination for honesty, underscores the complex intersection of personal pain and public responsibility. Her choice sent shockwaves not only through her own family, but across the tangled web of relationships that connect Hollywood, royalty, and power. The road ahead for the Clooneys remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. The crisis has changed them irrevocably. Today, we uncover how Amal Clooney secretly sent Harry shocking DNA test results and explosive photos revealing her husband's affair with Meghan Markle, delivering the devastating message, "You are not the father." This isn't just another royal scandal. It threatens to shake the very foundations of the monarchy, expose hidden betrayals, and force Harry to confront a painful truth that could change his life forever. Stay with us as we reveal the secret timeline, the evidence that shocked a nation, and what this means for the future of the royal family.